There is an old adage, truth is stranger than fiction. Today's account is living proof. This story involves the Olympics, the Sunday Times, a renowned UK newspaper, and a London-based gangster who vehemently denies the claims about his criminal activities, but who once took out a contract to eliminate police officers. This is a saga of police corruption and inertia, leading to the creation of a leviathan who ruled the underworld while posing as a successful property magnate. His organised crime group flourished for over a decade while seemingly invincible. It's the tale of David Hunt, a Canning Town tycoon who, in their own words, became too big for the UK's largest police force to take down. But who is this fella? Nestled in the lush green Hertfordshire countryside is a mansion stretching across a large estate, standing on the border of Essex and Hertfordshire. With its 7 bedrooms, tennis courts, a swimming pool and gym, this plush manor can deceive any onlooker for having a business tycoon own it. However, it harboured a dark secret, one its owner vehemently tried to hide from the public, but which was revealed by a brave journalist around 14 years ago. Before we get to him, let's discuss the exceptionally tall owner of that mansion. David Hunt, a gangster disguised as a businessman, was the boss of a vast, powerful criminal empire. Born in 1961 in Canning Town, Hunt was the youngest of 13 children. He claims his upbringing by Christian parents instilled in him a strong work ethic. However, whether this work ethic was responsible for his wealth or something else is a story for later. After completing school at 16, he became an amateur boxer and quickly earned a reputation as a ferocious fighter. While being a successful amateur boxer, Hunt made his living providing security to pubs and clubs. He was also a part-time scaffolder and scrap metal dealer. However, according to journalist Michael Gillard, he was also a successful criminal at that time, between the late 1970s to 1988, only that he wasn't charged for his crimes. His brothers were also mired in the life of crime. In April 1986, David Hunt was arrested with conspiracy for handling stolen goods and possession of a weapon. This was the only time he was charged, and the weapon was found at Colin Hunt's business address. Nevertheless, in 1988, Hunt moved out of the Canning Town area to 20 Rowan Road in Epping. Around this time, a police investigation opened up into leading criminals in the Plaistow area. Named Operation Tiger, the investigation created a spider diagram prepared from intelligence which showed Hunt at the centre of a web, being involved in the protection of clubs and pubs. It also found involvement with prostitution in Soho, along with other activities. The operation led to several arrests, but not of Hunt. His other brother, Raymond Hunt, was convicted for handling stolen cheques as a result of Operation Haddock. The gangster was also linked with the unsolved eliminations of Maxine Arnold and Terry Gooderham, whose bodies were found in Epping Forest in 1989. This incident led to Sunday Mirror's Peter Wilson getting headbutted by Hunt. Wilson had gone to Hunt's house to ask about the eliminations. David was arrested for the assault, but Wilson withdrew his complaint. In 1994, he was arrested again and charged with causing grievous bodily harm to a man named Stuart Everett at a Racing Pigeon Federation event. The man's love for racing pigeons will become more pronounced with an incident that comes later in the video. Returning to Hunt's grisly crimes, he was acquitted of the offence in November 1995. By 1994, Hunt had built up a scrap metal business later operated through a company called Hunt's Iron and Steel Limited. He subsequently formed more companies for various purposes, including an offshore company formed to purchase land and avoid tax. However, with multiple companies and ample wealth under his name, it was only a matter of time he would have to come to the attention of the Inland Revenue. They discovered that Hunt stated himself to be an employer with legitimate remuneration, but hadn't filed any tax returns. He didn't pay any tax from 1982 to 1996. Hunt told the Inland Revenue that he worked as a scaffolder until 1995. However, it was believed that he had made fraudulent representations on his loan applications and lied to mortgage lenders about his income. During the libel trial, he admitted that the application forms for his homes and later Morley's, his current residence, contained false information about his employment. the gangster claimed that he was a legitimate and successful businessman. His tax affairs had been regularised now, and he's had to pay over £1 million in tax last year. During the trial, he was asked how he could afford to buy the Morleys in just 5 years of being a scaffolder. This was no climbing up the ladder, this was a giant freaking jump. He said he couldn't recall how he did it, but it wasn't through the proceeds of crime. In 1996, one of Hunt's properties named 2 Greens Court was firebombed. It was the subject of a legal dispute. Around the same time, several articles published in the magazine Time Out stated that a former professional boxer from the East End was running a protection racket in Soho. This was obviously a reference to Hunt. However, he still claimed that the allegations were untrue and gave a plausible explanation for it. In 1997, a Time Out article identified underage prostitutes working at 2 Greens Court. The land registry files showed that the property was owned by a Jersey-based company, GRL, indirectly linked to Hunt. Hunt's golf club in Essex came into investigators' attention in various matters. In 2006, the Met officers searched the luxurious settings and found cases of Bollinger champagne which had recently been nicked from a lorry. In 2008, a club director, Peter Pomfret, was jailed for 10 years for being involved in a £37.5 million fraud. While David Hunt enjoyed a reputation for being a business magnate, a police investigation named Operation Tiberius in 2006, which looked into North and East London crime groups, came across the Hunt syndicate. The police discovered that the group was engaged in numerous criminal activities but had been evading prosecution for some time. And how did it manage to accomplish that? By utilising corrupt police contacts and intimidating witnesses. Even the police officers weren't safe from their intimidation. Under Operation Tiberius, the police conducted a raid at a scrapyard in the London Docklands area, along with a nearby facility to look for stolen goods. Their search bore fruit when they found 42 containers that had the proceeds of 18 lorry thefts and a commercial burglary. This was quite some evidence, but the case couldn't continue like many others. However, David Hunt denies these allegations even today. He adamantly claims that neither he has corrupted a police officer nor intimidated someone. However, several police investigations reveal his involvement in criminal activities. It appears that he started his criminal career from lorry hijackings. Reportedly, Hunt was a member of a gang called Snipers in the mid-80s who were involved in lorry hijackings in Essex and East London. The group was renowned for violent crime, and some of the members were called on to muscle in for more established criminals. However, Hunt's ambitions didn't allow him to stay a small-time criminal for long. According to a police report in 1985, he was moving up the ladder swiftly and oversaw the crimes carried out by the gangs, rather than being just the executor of the tasks. It still wasn't enough for him, as he gradually moved to bigger and more sinister crimes like narcotic trafficking, arms smuggling, money laundering and eliminations. But despite ample evidence, the man managed to get out of the cases scot-free. The cases collapsed usually or sometimes not even built, much to the chagrin of the officers leading these investigations. He was known to have derailed over 30 investigations into his criminal enterprises, either through bent cops or scared witnesses, which sometimes included police officers. Michael Gillard did a detailed story on David Hunt that was published in a series of articles in 2010. He was described as a criminal profiteering from the compulsory purchase of land for the Olympic Park, paid for by a £20 million government fund. Gillard had been following Hunt's activities since 1999. When the Olympics approached, he thought it was time to cover the criminal families taking public money for their land. On May 23, 2010, Gillard's articles published under the headline "Underworld Kings Cash In on Taxpayer Land Fund." However, the article wasn't focused entirely on Hunt. The article's main picture showed Terry Adams as well, and it was captioned as "Terry Adams, whose family, along with David Hunt, far right, is said to be involved in land deals near the 2012 site." The article mentioned that some of Britain's most notorious crime syndicates were seeking a piece of the pie in a £20 million government fund meant for acquiring land for regeneration projects. One criminal family had already received nearly £2 million, whereas the other prospective beneficiaries were implicated in elimination, narcotic trafficking and fraud. The article went on to state that David Hunt's involvement in the land prompted a violent turf war and a large-scale police corruption inquiry. The article pissed off David Hunt because this wasn't the first bad press for him. He filed a libel case against the media publication, the result of which turned out to be way more than just bad press. Notably, at the time, land regeneration was going on for the Olympics, and the area under subject was given up for regeneration just like the Olympic site. Many criminal syndicates were carrying it out while receiving public funds. Michael Gillard said in an interview that when he started to look at Hunt, he was on his way to becoming a legitimate businessman. He had made incredible investments in a scrap metal yard on the Thames in Dagenham, bought a 20-acre mansion, and had business interests in entertainment, the infamous Epping Forest Country Club. What's more, he was effectively a tax ghost. The returns he did file for, or his mortgage applications, usually misrepresented the size of his income. On paper, he was a mere freelance scaffolder. Hunt had taken some great leaps in life. He rose from a football hooligan to criminal godfather in a short time. His journey from running with the West Ham lads to lording it with its owners had one thing in common: extreme violence. A night out for Hunt didn't complete without a rumble. Once he spotted Gary Stretch, the former British light heavyweight boxing champion, in an East End club. He picked a fight and gave the champ a hiding. Now, when you commit such acts, word travels fast. With this fearsome reputation, it's easy to keep people from grassing. This was Hunt's own version of insurance. Hunt came to be known in the gangland as Longfella because of his 6'5" height, but his height wasn't the only reason for his fame in the gangster circles. He was friends with the infamous Cray twin, Reggie, and even visited him in prison in 2000 before the thug's death. However, Hunt had an explanation ready for these visits as well. According to him, they didn't say anything about his involvement in the criminal underworld. He only visited Cray a few times. David Hunt had a fearsome reputation for a reason. In 1997, Hunt slashed a man's face in a fit of anger. His victim needed life-saving medical treatment and had a 15-centimetre laceration from ear to chin. His victim was one Paul Kavanagh, who was also threatened not to give evidence against Hunt. The attack on Paul Kavanagh became police knowledge as a result of a cover operation codenamed Blackjack. The Met Police installed bugging devices in a car showroom which recorded the said attack. Apparently Kavanagh had upset an associate. Hunt was arrested and charged with the attack, but the case didn't continue. Kavanagh withdrew his statement to the police, after which the prosecution had to drop the case. It turned out later that Kavanagh was intimidated into not giving evidence. Another incident came to light during the court proceedings. In 2006, Hunt and his thugs brazenly attacked a man within a courthouse in central London. The victim was Billy Allen, a property developer who was a party in a feud over a plot's ownership. While Allen was a convicted fraudster, he didn't have the muscle to confront big guns like Hunt, and his rival, Charles Sheik Matthews, a robber turned trafficker, knew that. Both Matthew and Allen claimed ownership of the plot and first tried to settle the matter through courts. However, Matthew decided to play dirty and suggested Allen was a police informant before enlisting Hunt's help. Now Allen was concerned because he knew the Longfellow's reputation. But what was in it for Hunt to get involved? Hunt would have been benefiting from the sale of the land to the London Development Authority, LDA, in return for helping Matthews. According to the Underworld source, as mentioned in the Sunday Times article, Hunt intended to take the entire plot and sell it to the Adams family, who were buying up land in the area. What happened next was horrendous, as mentioned earlier. Hunt turned up at a court hearing with a group of heavies and attacked Allen. This incident showed that Hunt was powerful enough to not only deploy a group of strong and violent men at a court hearing, but also orchestrate an attack in a public area. This privilege can only be linked to a head of a criminal enterprise, let alone a simple business tycoon. When the police arrived at the scene, the walls and floor of the court lobby were covered in blood, and the culprit didn't even have criminal proceedings against him for this crime. Another incident that gave David Hunt the repute of a hard man was assault on a journalist. Peter Wilson, a young journalist at the Sunday Mirror, approached Hunt in 1992 over a reported crime. He was punched repeatedly by Hunt in the ribs. Wilson later testified for the Sunday Times in the libel trial, recalling the horrific incident. In his own words, "You don't need to exaggerate things like this. The entire exchange took place in less than a minute. The speed and aggression of Mr. Hunt was something that was quite bewildering," Wilson told the court. "All I had time to do was walk backwards slowly and keep my body language neutral. He grabbed me by the lapels. He whacked me with his head straight into my orbit, shook me round like a rag doll, swore at me and dropped me, and he was off. I got into the car hardly knowing what day it was. I haven't exaggerated a word of this. I'll never forget it." What's more, as acknowledged by the judge in the libel case, Hunt's company GRL was a front for money laundering to invest his ill-gotten gains. Not only this, but the GRL also purchased a property in Soho, which served as a clip joint, a sex shop and a prostitution base from 1995 until 2001. Interestingly, Hunt claims that he was unaware of the prostitution going on in the building, but the judge wasn't convinced, and neither are we. How can someone make boatloads of money from a place without knowing what's actually going on there? What do you think of this? Hunt didn't give up his tactics even during the trial. He pulled every trick in the book to curtail the proceedings. Even the bodyguards for Gillard refused to show up, hesitant to get on the wrong side of Hunt. Sunday Times employed 5 expensive professional security guards to protect its witnesses. On the second day of the trial, they walked out after getting approached in a pub. One security firm straight up refused to take the job. With this context, how can anyone deny intimidating people is beyond us, but Hunt managed to pull that off as well, we guess. The libel trial took a review of Hunt's entire life and discussed the police investigation naming him. Obviously, that involved a lot of crimes, a little too much for someone who claimed he had no link with crime or violence. Interestingly, Hunt defended himself by arguing that in the late 1980s his name was being abused. It was falsely associated with criminal activities without any factual basis. He said that the police fostered his reputation for a man of violence. He explained, "I think this is where the situation has got out of hand. Because I had a good name in my area as being a good person and a gentleman, and I believe people took that out of context, in the advantage in maybe doing drugs, etc. And that's where the reputation has come from without me knowing." His defence would have been funny had he not actually committed those gruesome crimes. Hunt said he was shocked when he saw the article. "I lost my parents when I was a young lad, and this has affected me similar to that. It crucified me," he told the judge. The gangster further added, "I'm a man who grew up in a tough area, and people never let that go. I can't be responsible for that, sir. That's why I'm here today." Hunt told the court he'd been arrested 7 times in the 80s. He worked for a scrap business owned by one of his brothers, but moved on to running a land and property business in London that raked in 30 grand a week, or maybe more. Now that's a smart way to get the judge's sympathies, but fortunately, the judge saw right through him. After losing the libel case against the Sunday Times in 2013, questions emerged about the source of his lavish lifestyle. He'd lost credibility, and his criminal activities became public knowledge. Lord Justice Peregrine Simon described him as the head of an organised crime network implicated in extreme violence and fraud in his judgment. It also stated that he was engaged in nefarious activities across London and the home counties. Justice Simon also stated that he was convinced Hunt had used violence and intimidation to scare witnesses and avoid prosecutions. What possibly could Hunt say now in his defence? While he didn't have any justification, he still denied the allegations. What's more, throughout the 5-week trial, Hunt's lawyers described his client as a rough diamond businessman who built up a £25 million property portfolio of pubs and restaurants after a tough upbringing in East London. Moreover, he tried to garner sympathy by claiming that his client was heartbroken by the claims of heading a criminal network, but neither his appeal to the emotions nor a mild-mannered and courteous behaviour worked to bring him the desired outcome. He lost the libel case with public acknowledgement of his association with crime. Despite claiming that he did nothing wrong, Hunt didn't appeal the verdict of the libel case. This strategically backfired because this was the first ruling on his activities. There were no criminal court hearings on his criminal career, and this one brought his nefarious career on official records, even as a libel case proceedings. The court heard that he was the subject of numerous police investigations, surveillance operations, special teams and serious organised crime agency operations. And yet he only had one minor conviction to his name. It was also discussed that he was known in the Gangland circles as the Long Fella and engaged in violence, intimidation, money laundering and was the recipient of proceeds of prostitution. The proceedings also cited an investigation report dubbing him too big for the Metropolitan Police to tackle. While the gangster lost the case, the judge did rule that the Sunday Times had not established Hunt's involvement in eliminations on narcotic trafficking. But the ruling favoured journalist Michael Gillard, who exposed Hunt as a criminal who was profiting from the Olympic Park land. Gillard won the case and achieved a lot professionally, but at a cost. After exposing Hunt, he couldn't roam freely or attend public events in London. He didn't even accept his Journalist of the Year award in person. Here's a snippet of the video ceremony.
And the winner of the Journalist of the Year is Michael Gillard.
Coming back to Hunt, what happened after the libel loss? Not only did his secrets come into limelight, he owed money to the opponents in legal costs. In 2014, a few months after the libel judgment came out, David Hunt made headlines again. This time as the recipient of a £1 million from a wealthy co-owner of a Premier League football club, West Ham FC. A wealthy businessman, former pornographer and a multi-millionaire, David Sullivan, gave the gangster the said amount through his finance firm, GCCONO 102, 3 months after he lost the libel case and was named as an OCG. The loan was made to Hunt's UK Properties, a company of which he is the director, on October 3rd, 2013. Notably, Hunt owed the Sunday Times £805,000. According to the Sunday Times, it was paid £505,000 the next day, and then the remaining £300,000 was released 10 days later. The loan was secured against multiple properties of Hunt, including a golf club in Essex and a restaurant formerly owned by actor Sir Sean Connery and the late West Ham captain Bobby Moore. However, Sullivan wasn't the only lender to Hunt. Lloyds Bank also lent Longfellow up to £4 million around the time he was fighting the libel battle. It seems Hunt had no dearth of wealthy connections who were willing to lend him money despite his label as the head of a crime syndicate. While the said entities didn't have any problem with his criminal connections, some did. Barclays called in a £4.2 million loan from Hunt when a manager read reports of his libel case. After this, Hunt had to obtain a secured loan from Lloyds. It's worth noting here that Lloyds was then partly owned by the taxpayer. What's more, the bank was required to vet prospective customers, and yet it agreed to loan Hunt despite his reputation that was part of the public official records now. Notably, the liabilities of the Sullivan's companies, declared a few months later, implied that Hunt's loan was repaid quickly. You're not going to believe how audacious and powerful David Hunt had got it over in time. He had released a contract to take out the detectives working on his case. And guess what? The detective got wind of it, reported it to their bosses, and faced a criminal investigation as a result. This revelation also came up during the libel trial. In 2016, 2 of these officers received apologies from the Met Police for subjecting them to criminal investigations. According to the Sunday Times, David McKelvey, a former Detective Chief Inspector, and Darren Guntrick, then serving Detective Sergeant, sued the Met for abuse of power, false imprisonment and malicious procurement of search warrants. D.I. McKelvey stated before court that he reported to his borough commander in January 2008 that he and other officers investigating Hunt faced death threats. His report stated, "I have no doubt that David Hunt has the motive, means and capability of funding this contract to kill. He runs his criminal network by use of extreme violence." He further stated that murder was second nature to Hunt. He was believed to have been personally involved in several contract killings. The officer also pointed out the role of corrupt officers and officials, stating it's because of them law enforcement was unsuccessful in targeting him. However, after this warning, McKelvey, Guntrip and another detective were subjected to a 2-year investigation based on what they claimed was flawed evidence, discredited intelligence and information which the Met knew to be false in order to cover up widespread corruption. Notably, McKelvey's career was ruined as a result of a criminal investigation. He suffered a nervous breakdown as a result. Imagine telling your bosses that your life was under threat because of the task you've been allocated and having the book thrown at you in response. It could make any officer highly anxious. Mac was getting the heat from the Met's Professional Standards Unit, known as the Ghost Squad, a unit that was commonly reserved for bent coppers. An operation named Tiberius in 2002 found that the crime lord was assisting in evading justice by a network of corrupt serving and former police officers. It found another more sinister fact about its own people, but that will come later. The investigation report stated that the Hun Syndicate developed an extensive criminal empire that hitherto evaded significant penetration from law enforcement. The Syndicate has achieved this invulnerability through a mixture of utilising corrupt police contacts and the intimidation of witnesses brave enough to give evidence against them. The report dubbed the Hunt Syndicate as one of the most violent groups in the northeast London. It was responsible for a series of vicious assaults against debtors and rivals. Their main sphere of influence is narcotic importation and protection. How is this powerful gang operating freely? Enter bent coppers. There were corrupt cops within the police ranks who were colluding with Hunt, providing him information and sharing details of investigations against him. Met's anti-corruption team named 4 Met detectives working for the syndicate. One of these detectives was high profile and later gave evidence to Parliament. The operation reported that corrupt officers betrayed the Met by telling the Hunt Syndicate about tracking devices placed on its vehicles, leaking information about police inquiries and carrying out checks on police intelligence databases. It seems the Met was plagued by claims of collusion with criminals in the early 2000s. The next years were marked by a serious crisis, as the department was swamped by claim after claim of misconduct, corruption or cover-up. 2013 was the most troubling year in this regard. From attempting to smear the family of a slain teenager, Stephen Lawrence, to prevent an inquiry into themselves, to shooting a 24-year-old gang member, Azelle Rodney, without any legal justification, the force's dark secrets were coming out one by one. What's more, the force had eliminated a private detective named Daniel Morgan because he had evidence of Met's corruption. The force's trouble aggravated when the aforementioned 3 Met detectives' revelations about its collusion with Hunt in evading justice for 3 decades came to light. What's more, the Met sued the tenacious reporter of the Sunday Times, Michael Gillard, who did a story about Hunt's criminal activities. Michael Gillard wrote a book, Legacy: Gangsters, Corruption and the London Olympics, where he uncovered the corruption around the event of the Olympics in 2012 at length. The book also covered David Hunt's story, while digging deep into the battle for the spoils of land being developed for the London Olympics. Interestingly, while the libel case was going on, the Commissioner of the Met and the Serious Organised Crime Agency brought a separate action against the Sunday Times and Michael Gillard. The purpose was to stop the case defendants from relying on or disclosing police documents that they claimed were handed to Gillard in breach of confidence. A trial happened in July 2011, after which 2 judgments were delivered. The court order confined the use of the documents by the defendants of leaked documents in the libel case. While the Met filed a case against the paper, they launched an internal mole hunt as well. This legal action impeded on the paper's defence in the libel case, but the paper was able to win the case even with limited use of the leaked documents. A squeaky clean record. Nevertheless, these activities were bound to come on the radar of police and SOCA, but for 3 decades the man escaped prosecution mainly because his victims withdrew from their cases. The only criminal conviction he has under his name came at the age of 26 for handling and possessing a weapon. He was given a 9-month suspended jail sentence for 2 years. Notably, Hunt was close friends with Terry Adams and had been part of the narcotic game in the 1980s. This was the time when the UK was a haven for coke cartels, and Hunt made large amounts of money by facilitating these activities. Nevertheless, an interesting incident emerged in April 2020. Apparently, Longfellow's son had to plead with his neighbours to stop shooting his beloved racing pigeons. He wrote a handwritten letter pinned to a notice board on the village green. The letter was undated and pinned up a few hundred yards from the mansion. The note was pinned up by his son and stated, "Neighbours, my dad owns racing pigeons. Some of these pigeons have been shot with an airgun, have been so badly injured that they've died. Pigeons that race are easily recognisable as they fly in flocks. We would really appreciate it if you knew anyone who owns an airgun to please not shoot them, as they are our pets." Whether this immensely polite note ended the killings or not, we don't know. But a resident of the area was cited by newspaper Daily Express saying, "If I found out I'd been shooting Davy Hunt's pigeons, it would have been a good reason to stop." Hunt bought the mansion in 1993 and has been keeping his prized pigeons there since then. Currently, he resides in this lavish home with wife Tina and their adult children. Do you think David Hunt would have been able to keep his power and control without the corrupt police officials?